Hi everyone, welcome to yet another game from the 2013 British Championships. This was the game between international masturbates, yes, ha ha ha, and William Fu. Just had to get that innuendo out of the way. Anyway, Bayesian I am at 2375 FIDE, and William Fu is 2090 FIDE, but he does have an ECF of like over 200, so it's not going to be a complete walkover it seems. And certainly not a white banker. Richard Bates had white. He opened with d4. d5 was the response. c4, the Queen's Gambit. c6, Slav defense. Knight f3, Knight f6, and now Queen b3, which is a sign line given in Kaufmann's repertoire to avoid the complicated Slav lines. And sort of maybe just play a bit like the Russian system against Grunfeld, where white plays Queen b3 and then Queen takes c4. Where white will get a good centre potentially, but its Queen will be exposed to potential attacks. Of course, the main line is just Knight c3. You've got the Chebarenko, the semi-Slav, and the main Slav with dc4. Maybe I think also got g6 as well, which is the Slav Grunfeld hybrid. But not, of course, bishop f5 for reasons explained in about 52 other videos. Queen b3, so black usually takes to get his bishop out safely because the queen was putting pressure on b7 and also expose white's queen potentially to tempo gaining attacks. Bishop f5, g3, so white fianchettos the bishop, e6, bishop e2, bishop e7. And white is going to get potentially a small advantage, but maybe this move is a bit too passive, blocking the bishop in. Maybe just Knight c3 and try and play rook e1 and try and get e4 in potentially. So Knight bd7, then Queen b3 to get the queen out of the way of Knight b6 and put pressure on the pawn. And then black can play Queen b6, and if white takes, take out with the a pawn, where the a file is as important as double pawns as a factor in this position, because they're not weak double pawns. And as King's Crusher states in his videos, that weaknesses are only significant if they are exploitable, and these weaknesses are not easy to exploit. e3 was chosen instead, and maybe black could have stuck his queen on d5 potentially. And I think white should retreat his queen, otherwise black might be better then. He's nice gripping the d5 square, and then try and play Knight c3 to get the queen out, and then an interesting plan again of allowing double pawns, or in fact what black can do is give his bishop up for this knight and win this pawn. But maybe that's a bit dubious, because that g2 bishop comes unopposed and white can play e4 really fast and gets good counterplay. So maybe best after Queen e2 is to actually play this interesting move again, allowing double pawns. And yeah, you get c5 in this position, and the pawn's actually quite nice and it's hard to exploit. But Knight bd7 was chosen, typical solid Slav move. Queen goes back to get away with Knight b6. And also another advantage is it supports the e4 push, ready to maybe blow black away, so black sticks his knight in to stop that. Knight c3 to dislodge the knight, and now white takes. And again, you see now white's now got this isolated pawn in a2 potentially. Bishop e4, and the plan is maybe to swap white's annoying bishop off if the knight dares move. Rook d1, maybe white's got plans for c4, d5 in the future, but black's is very solid, and I think black is equalised in this position in my opinion. Queen a5, because black's got weaknesses to aim at, c3 and a2, and the queen hits both, so a very good multi-purpose move. c4 is played to get out of the way of that. Now the queen switches across to king's side. It's quite nice now. The queen goes to a5 and then switches across, and the queen's very active. h3, rook fd8, bishop d2, rook ac8. The rook's come to nice files. Bishop c3. So maybe white is starting to gear up for a d5 push, which will liberate his bishop. And now black decides it's time to put pressure on white's centre and plays the thematic Slav move c5, aiming to reduce white's space advantage in the centre. And now white lashes out with g4, which just seems to create a few potential weaknesses. If white takes, then I would recommend next after actually taking with the queen, the c4 pawn is immediately under attack and it's very hard to defend. But g4 is chosen. Queen goes back to g6, supporting a potential light squared invasion on its diagonal. And now d5 was chosen. So white opens his bishop up against the black king potentially. But e takes d5, e takes d5, and now h5, a really good move that. Chipping away at white's king side. And the point is, if the g5 can't be played, so black's going to get some inroads towards the white king potentially. And now white plays knight e1, which is a good defensive move. If white takes, then after queen takes h5, his king's looking very weak. There's all sorts of potential moves like knight f6 and maybe g5, g4. This is just not good. So knight e1 is played, h4, queen g4, because white wants the queens off, but that's concession because this endgame is actually very good for black. We've got a nice 3-1 majority on the queen side. White's passed pawn on the d file is going to be blockaded. And there's this is slightly better for black. This rook ac1 swap, because the more pieces that come off, the more important black's queenside pawn majority is going to be. Knight f6, getting knight active, and actually wins a pawn on this because now both pawns can't be protected. So knight f4, he used to take his pawn for free, and now black's a pawn up. e4, knight e5, blockading that pawn. Black still has to, of course, be careful. White's got some activity and protected past pawn on d5. b6, king e2, g6, knight e2, f5. Fighting back, white striking at white's pawn and undermining. And white probably should play f3 in this position, just protect it, but he takes for some reason. Trying to work his IM magic, perhaps. And black could have actually took this pawn, got rid of white's pawn. After fg6. This is a good move. Or in fact, rook f8 is a very good move. Just aiming at the f2 point and threatening stuff like rook d2. Say f4 then, like g6. But gf's fine as well, because the d5 pawn's still hanging. Rook h1 is played to try and get some counterplay and set a little cheapo, potentially. Well, if rook takes d5, white can play rook g3 check. And king f7 is king h8 loses to rook h8, and this isn't actually so great this move because we've got rook f7 check, and king f6 is the only move, and then knight f4. And in fact, I think white escapes a perpetual check, forced, and then if we just go check again, it's just a perpetual because king e8 is made by rook g8 and king f8 is made by knight e6 and rook g8. So that move would allow white unnecessary counterplay and allow the draw actually. And if black avoids a draw, he loses. Of course, it'll still be a good result, but again, you don't play the rating, you play the man. So if you're a pawn up against an IM, even if you're only 2000, not even 2100, because of course he's a lot stronger than that, then you go for the win. Rook c7. The scene is set for an upset potentially. Knight f4, still a lot of work to be done. Rook g7 check, king f1, rook g4, nailing down white's counterplay. And this game is actually very engine accurate by black, which is very impressive. Rook ch3, threatening cheapos. So knight f7 to cover the cheapo. Knight h4, which looks active and threatens a cheapo again, but after king f8, the white's little mini initiative is over, because the king is going to scamper to the centre, where it's also going to help win some pawns. And in fact, after rook d3, c4 is played, and all of a sudden white is practically lost because there's very little they can do to stop these pawns from hurtling down the board. Because after the rook goes back, the pawn goes forward another step, and we'll step closer to a queenie. Rook h3 is played to put some lateral pressure on it, but now c2. And this is not good. Rook c1's forced. Rook c4 because rooks belong behind past pawns. And now this extra pawn is starting to hurt white, and the d5 pawn is still in on pre's in some lines. But it's never actually taken, because it doesn't need to be taken. Rook d3, knight comes in with tempo. Rook d2. And now the key move to crown off black's play, rook h4, because the pawn is immune due to the threats on the knight and also the threats on h1. Now it goes back to cover the fork, but now black just wins a piece with f4 because the knight actually is immobile, he can't move. Because rook h1 is killing then, so he sacks the knight. But now black's just a piece up for a pawn, and this is practically resignable. But he fights on for a few more moves. Rook f2 check, king g7, rook d2, rook f8. And then this is good because it forces the pair of rooks off. But white does get a bit of counterplay with this pawn. But I think that was best. Nice, rook comes back, a4, take. Just block the pawn. And now we can try and win it. In fact, the pawn just gets won. And once it's won, actually, white realises he's a piece down for nothing and decides to throw in the towel. It's maybe actually a little tiny bit premature, this resignation, because there is only black is only going to have one pawn left. I mean, it's winning, and I expect certain willing food to win it quite comfortably. But still, maybe it's worth playing on for a little bit, I'm not sure. Because at the end of the day, everyone makes mistakes. But I can't talk about premature resignation, since I've resigned in the one position before. But a very impressive game, that. I would almost say this is a sort of model game for the Slav, this. So it's just very nice how he neutral stops all white's attacking chances, gets the queens off and grinds it down and ending and wins a pawn. And Richard Bates is a very strong player. So it was definitely an impressive achievement. And I like to do videos of shocks, so expect this to be the first of many shocks over the course of this tournament and series. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this game and video, and please leave in the comments and thoughts. Thanks very much.